Kill them all, God will know his own. Those words, cold and merciless, are said to have been shouted to an army of crusaders in the year 1209, just moments before they unleashed one of the bloodiest massacres of the Middle Ages. A massacre where not even priests, women, or children were spared. But who were these soldiers? Who gave such a chilling command? And why did a city of thousands have to be erased from the map in the name of God? Welcome to Forbidden History Vault, the place where we uncover the secrets and shadows that history books would rather keep buried. And today, we're opening the vault on the massacre of Béziers, a moment so shocking, so brutal, that it still echoes like a warning through the centuries. Stay with me, because this story is not what you think. By the end, you'll question whether these words were truly spoken, or if they were a piece of dark propaganda that changed history forever. Let's rewind. Europe. The early 13th century. The Catholic Church is the most powerful force in the Western world. Kings rule kingdoms, yes, but the Pope. He rules their souls. To defy him is to risk eternal damnation. But in the south of France, in a region known as Languedoc, something dangerous was spreading. A belief system that rejected the wealth and corruption of the Church. A faith that looked at the Pope and saw not the voice of God, but a fraud. They were called the Cathars. And to Rome, they were heretics. The Cathars preached simplicity. They rejected violence, greed, and the materialism of the Catholic Church. They believed the world was caught between two forces, one of light, one of darkness. To them, the Church, with its gold, its armies, its indulgences, looked a lot more like darkness. But here's the dangerous part, ordinary people loved them. The Cathars weren't kings or bishops. They were neighbors, farmers, preachers who spoke in the common tongue. They lived simply, and they lived their faith. And the Church? It couldn't allow this. Because if ordinary Christians started following the Cathars instead of Rome, the very foundation of papal power would crumble. So, in 1209, Pope Innocent III declared a crusade. Not against Muslims in the Holy Land this time, but against fellow Christians, in France. The target, the Cathars. The first city in their path, Béziers. And what happened there would be remembered as one of the darkest moments in Christian history. It was July, 1209. A massive army of crusaders, drawn from across Europe, marched south. Reports say as many as 20,000 soldiers, hungry for both glory and salvation, converged on Béziers. Inside the city walls were around 10,000 to 15,000 people. Not all were Cathars. In fact, most were regular Catholics. But here's the problem, in the eyes of the Crusaders, that didn't matter. The city harbored heretics. And to Rome, that was enough. When the Crusaders arrived, they demanded the townspeople hand over the Cathars. Give us the heretics, and the rest of you can live. But Béziers refused. Historians tell us the city's Catholic leaders stood with their Cathar neighbors. The townspeople said, "We are all citizens of Béziers. If you want them, you'll have to take all of us." It was a defiant stand, but it sealed their fate. Because the Crusaders weren't about to leave empty-handed. And this is where the story takes its most infamous turn, the moment one phrase would become etched into history forever. According to chroniclers, when the Crusader knights asked how they could possibly separate heretics from true believers, a man named Arnaud Amalric, the papal legate, gave them their answer. His words: "Cadite eos. Navit enim dominus que sunt ius." In English, "Kill them all, God will know his own." Whether every soldier heard it or not, whether it was shouted in the chaos or whispered in command tents, the result was the same. The gates were stormed. The Crusaders poured in. And what followed was nothing short of slaughter. Men, women, children, priests, even those hiding inside churches, all were cut down. Contemporary accounts claim no one was spared. The Church of St. Mary Magdalene, crammed with terrified townsfolk, was set on fire. Entire streets ran red. Chroniclers estimated 10,000 to 20,000 dead in one day. Think about that. An entire city, gone. And when the killing stopped, Béziers was nothing but a smoldering ruin. But here's the chilling part, some historians today say Amalric might never have spoken those words at all. For centuries, the quote has been repeated as the ultimate symbol of religious fanaticism. But was it ever said? Some scholars argue Amalric did issue the order, a brutal command to wipe the slate clean. After all, the massacre happened. Entirely innocent Catholics were butchered alongside heretics. The line fits the madness of the moment. But others suggest something more sinister. That the quote was added later, by chroniclers hostile to the Church, as a piece of propaganda to paint Rome as bloodthirsty and merciless. So was it a literal command? Or a legend, a phrase that captured the spirit of what happened, even if no one said it? Either way, the meaning is the same. In Béziers, the Crusaders didn't care who was Cathar and who was Catholic. To them, everyone was guilty. And the city was wiped out. But the massacre of Béziers was only the beginning of a much larger war, a war that would hunt the Cathars to extinction. News of Béziers spread like wildfire. Terror gripped the region. Town after town fell, some surrendering without a fight. The Cathars who survived retreated to mountain fortresses, clinging to hope as the Crusaders advanced. But Rome would not stop. The Albigensian Crusade raged for 20 years. The Cathars were hunted, burned, and destroyed. By the mid-13th century, their faith was gone. And Béziers? It stood as the grim warning. Resist Rome, and you'll be erased. 800 years later, the name Béziers still carries the weight of horror. It stands as a symbol of what happens when power, fear, and fanaticism collide. It's the story of neighbors who chose to stand together, and paid with their lives. And it's the reminder that in war, inquisition, and crusade, innocence is often the first casualty. And those words, whether truly spoken or not, echo down the centuries: kill them all, God will know his own. A line that reminds us of the dangers of blind obedience. This is Forbidden History Vault, where we pull back the curtain on the stories history tried to bury. But Béziers is just one chapter. Because if you think religious violence ended in the Middle Ages, you're wrong. In fact, just a few decades later, another mountain fortress would become the last stand of the Cathars, a place where an entire faith died in fire. Want to know what happened there? Then don't miss our next investigation. Because history has secrets, and we're here to unlock them. Like, and subscribe to unlock more secrets from the Forbidden History Vault. And remember, some vaults were sealed, for a reason.